Hey Sarah, okay, I'm sorry it took so long. That was filming the first part and it just kind of cut me off because I think the video got too long because it got up to 12 minutes. But anyway, this is where we were up to, and basically this section is my sexual offenses. And so, you know, as I explained at the end of the last video, I've pulled out the definitions from the legislation because most of the offences, sexual offences, refer back to these definitions. So I just put them at the front here at the first page of the sexual offences, just so it's easily accessible. So here we have definitions, so sexual penetration, touching, and all of this is just legislation. You can see it's just legislation, and I've underlined and turned it the font blue for important parts, so just specific parts you have to remember. And so these are still old definitions. So what's reasonable belief, what's consent, what's taking part in a sexual act, sexual act, and all just offences. So this, my first 3 pages are old definitions, sorry, not defences. And you know, this is also some legislation. So objectives, guiding principles, direction on reasonable belief. This is a very important section of the legislation as well. And so once I've got out all the really important parts of the legislation, I start doing the same thing as I did for offence against the persons that I showed you before. So offences, you can see, all involve an absence of consent. And first one is rape, and you know, again we have actus reus, mens rea. And so here, you know, first element, second element. Here actually I've separated out the first element. So first of all, we have to prove that the accused penetrates another person, that I've called B. And then we see there's legislation, sexual penetration. Penetration, we go to the definition. So if you were in an exam and you thought that the accused could be guilty of rape, then you go through the elements. So the first element, you say penetration, and then you'd refer to legislation, which I showed you before. So we go back to the first page, sexual offences, sexual penetration, and then you'd see if the facts finds sexual penetration proved. Okay, and then, oops, sorry, went too far. Okay, and then you go to the 1B, which is intentioned, and then you have to show that the accused intended, and again, this is found using a definition. So intention is wait, where is it? Hang on. Oh right, sorry. Intention is under offences against a person. Sorry, but I'm not going to flip back to there because it's too far. But you get the general idea. Second element, that B does not consent. So lack of consent. Here's the important part. So the second is lack of consent, and here, because this is the first offence involving consent issues. The other offences that we talked about before, which is like serious injury and that kind of stuff, didn't involve consent as an element. So this is the first offence I've in my notes that's talking about consent. So I fleshed it out here. So consent is relevant to all these offences. And, you know, consent is free agreement, blah, blah, blah. And all these, you know, they're all relevant. The definitions above are all relevant. And so you go to them, see direction on consent, direction on reasonable belief in consent. That's why I say see sections 34, blah, blah, blah. And that's all up there. And then, you know, we have to look at that. Medical and hygiene purposes. All right, here, so that, notice that was all my legislation stuff. And then if we go down a bit further and looking at special cases like medical and hygienic purposes, we have case law. And again, you can see underneath consent, medical and hygiene purposes, I've got the dot points, only applicable against specific offences, except when there is a good reason. Brown. Okay, so that's the case, and that's the common law. And I notice I don't have anything about Brown, I don't have any facts about Brown, we don't know what's going on with Brown, only that the result of Brown is that there must be a good reason. Alright, and we look here, there's more common law stuff, We've got Clarence, Lineker, Galen, Mobilio, that kind of stuff. All the common law, alright? And so yeah, we go through it as necessary, right? And remember, that's all under consent, okay? And so if you notice, I put here a tab, consent and reasonable belief. Why? Because when we go to the next offense, after this is rape. After rape is finished, and we look at the next offense under Section 39, which is rape by compelling sexual penetration, there is also an element of consent. And see element of consent for rape under Section 38. So consent is an issue for all these offenses. See, sexual assault, V does not consent. You know, and all we have to do is every time there's consent, we refer back to rape, where we've talked about consent for the first time. And all the relevant legislation and common law is all here, okay? So that's why I've sticky tabbed consent here, so that anytime I need to talk about consent, I just go straight here. Alright, and so if you found consent is the second element. Then we go to the third element, which is that the accused does not reasonably believe. So reasonable belief. Alright, so for that, we've got another big section, because we talk, it's quite like a meaty element, especially when you're arguing a problem in the exam. You need to talk about this a lot, whether, you know, the accused reasonably believed that there was consent, if there's absence of consent. And so this is something that all the other offenses have as well, reasonable belief. And so anytime you need reasonable belief, you just refer back to the rape offense, and, you know, all the stuff is here. And we see there's a partial objective test. There's legislation. The legislation is, remember, it's the first couple of pages. And, you know, all this good stuff. Alright? And then it's the same process as I showed you before. So you go to the next offense, and we look at the first element, definitions. Second element, compelling. Third element, intent. Fourth element, fifth element, blah, 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 blah. And you just go through it all. You see? Okay? Sexual assault by compelling sexual touching. Blah, blah, blah. All these defenses. Yeah? Okay. And, you know, relevance of consent, indecent act, with a child under age of 16, and again, you see all the elements I've numbered, and it's really good, because what happens when you put your notes like this is that during the exam, alright, all you need to do during reading time is identify, you read the facts in the question that they give you, and you identify what potential offenses that the accused could be charged under, okay? And so you basically just start with, you put this as a heading. So whatever the offense that they could potentially be charged of, put that as a heading. And then underneath that, you should write, the accused can potentially be charged for this offense, alright? And then you go to, and then you write this as a heading. The first offense, the first element as a heading, and then you talk about it. You say if it's proved. Then you go to the second element. Write this as a heading. You see all this bolded, underlined font? Those are headings. So you put this as a heading, and then you say if the second element is proven. And then you go to third, and then fourth, and fifth, and you just go through it really methodically, okay? And, you know, that's the same for all offenses, basically. And we see this, blah, 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 and it's all the same stuff, okay? All the same stuff. Okay, so it's very methodical. It's very, you know, it makes sense, and you organize your notes so that they make sense to you. Okay, now I'm just going to go through the whole notes for you, so you just get a really good idea of what's going on. Homicide. See, homicide. I've got the tab. So anytime, if my book's closed and I need to get to homicide, I know homicide is right there. Alright? Homicide. So here we've got murder. And we've got all the elements under actus reus and mens rea. So the first is that the accused committed acts which caused the victim's death. So causation. This causation is a little bit different. So, you know, we've got causation as a fleshed out element. You see, and because it's such an important part, I've got it as a tab, causation. And so we go here. Remember how I said earlier in the other video, anytime you've got unique causation as an element, all you need to do is underneath causation, underneath the element, write refer to murder. Because then you have it all in one place and you're not repeating yourself. Okay? So for causation here, we've got the relevant legislation. So a person has died when irreversible cessation of circulation, blah, blah, blah. All the legislation here. Then we have common law. See? Must be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that the accused committed the alleged relevant acts. And that's from Ryan. So again, common law and the case name in brackets. Dot points. And again, here, we have really good examples of all the common laws that's relevant. So, act that caused victim to die. There must be significant contribution. There must be a substantial and operating cause. And that's from Royale. And the acts do not need to be the sole cause of death. Again, Royale. Okay? Human being, blah, blah, blah. And this is still all the first element. Causation. All the common law. Act must... Oh, I've already gone through this. And then, look... Can still be properly be said to be cause of the act, even if some other cause is also operating. That's from Evans and Gardiner, R. and Smith. Okay, so all these like relevant considerations and factors in determining causation. We have dot points. We have common law, and they're all case notes, and all the case is put in brackets. Okay. And so this is all still causation, failure to intervene, case law, other situations. So here I've particularly put a section on case law because there are different situations, really specific situations that have come up through case law. Okay, so I've put, let's see, I've put Jordan, which is medical intervention, Smith, medical treatment, Royale, which is jumping out the window due to the threat. So that would be involving victim's acts, whether that's a cause, whether it's caused if the victim acts in a particular way to contribute to their own injury, that kind of stuff. And you see, Evans and Gardiner and Blowie. And that's all the first element. So once you've gone through that and all the relevant stuff, you go back to the second element, and he's under mens rea. You see, the accused committed those acts voluntarily. So voluntariness, again, required that the acts were deliberate and willed. And we get that from Ryan, alright? And this is further expansion on what voluntariness means. So it applies to all offences. Again, we've got a lot of case law here. Ryan, all Ryan, alright? And then we go to types of voluntary acts, blah, 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 blah. And you talk about this as it is relevant to your facts. If they're not relevant and, you know, you found voluntariness proven, okay, move on to the next element. This is only element number 2. So you go to the third element, which is here. So the accused committed to those acts while intending or knowing that it was probable. Okay, so that's from Crabb. Again, case law. So intention to kill, direct intention, which is subjective. So they must have known themselves, and that's Myers. And you got all the relevant case law here. So reckless murder. Bowie says likely is probable. Likely, the notion of substantial, real, and not remote chance. Crabb, again, Crabb. Alright, transferred malice, blah, blah, blah. Constructive murder. All the relevant stuff. Alright, and then once you've finished, you say that element has been proved because blah, blah, blah. And you go to the fourth element. The accused did not have a lawful justification. And for this, you know, there's no legislation or common law. It's a very easy element to prove. You just say that, hey, the accused did not have a lawful justification. Move on, okay? So second offense under homicide, so manslaughter. And it's the same usual stuff, you know. First element, alright, here's legislation. Second element, a bit of case law there. Third element, a lot of case law here. Pemble, Lamb, you know. It's just, see, notice how under the third element for unlawful act, I've just shown must involve breach of criminal law, and that's from Pemble. Does not include acts that give rise to a civil liability. That's from Lamb. You know, all the really good stuff. And we go to the last element, which is the relevant act was dangerous and dangerous. The common law helps us interpret what dangerous means, and according to Wilson, the case, the common law says test is objective, and we need to find if a reasonable person would have realized they were exposing the deceased to an appreciable risk of injury. Then Needham says the test is that no need to prove that A realized their act was dangerous. That's Needham. Okay? Serious injury, and this is a bit of legislation here. And it's all just the same stuff. And so we go through negligent manslaughter as well. Blah, blah, blah. Couple driving causing death. Suicide pact, dangerous driving, infanticide. You know, it's all just... oh, right, sorry. Here are criminal defenses. Alright, here's... We've got to defenses. This is the last part. Alright, so it's just onus of proof. Here, you notice that the table is structured a bit differently because these aren't offences. I'm not talking about actus reus or mens rea. Here's just all the defences that are possible. So self-defense, the elements that you got to prove, belief in necessity, blah blah blah. And you notice there's also a lot of common law here. Alright? And we move through it. Application of self-defense to a threat. Alright, and the next, self-defense, evidence of family violence and self-defense, blah blah blah. And you see, this is legislation, all the blue stuff. It's legislation, and then there's case law. According to Olin, FV itself is family violence itself is not a defense. It only aids in proving self-defense, duress. So you just have to look at this, blah blah blah. Duress, legislation, all legislation. Okay, case law. All right. So when you're applying this kind of stuff, you need to look at both the legislation as well as the case law, and that's basically it.